Okay, well, for those of you that have not seen me in person, I'm Jan Bedell, and I am a neurodevelopmentalist. I've been doing that work for over 30 years, and this was back when the MRIs and all the imaging things that we have now were not available. Anyway, I had a real need in my own life for my child who was really struggling. And it was by the time she was 15 is when we found the neurodevelopmental approach. And it just changed her life. And at that point, it changed mine too, because it was like God said, take a left right here. You've been looking for this for 15 years for your daughter. And other people are looking for it as well. So I'm excited to be able to bring this important topic to you about dyslexia tonight is going to be our focus. We're just going to get started with, I've got a PowerPoint to show you. And the format where we're going to use is I'm going to just go through, for those of you that are not familiar with the neurodevelopmental approach, just go through the presentation so that you get a big picture understanding of what we're talking about here. And if you will either put your questions in the chat or just write them down and we can talk about them as soon as I'm finished. So we're going to leave some time at the end for questions and answers. And I hope to really help you with a better understanding from a neurodevelopmental approach about my experience with this topic of dyslexia. So I'm going to share my screen here. All right, so I named this The Truth About Dyslexia, the causes, the myths, and the solutions, because I want to paint a broad picture of what most of you have probably always heard about dyslexia, if you're not in the neurodevelopmental field, and then some solutions. So that for me, that's what I was looking for, is solutions. I didn't need a label for my child, and they tried a lot of different labels. I didn't need that. I needed to know what to do to help her and what to do next. So we're going to look at some of the causes and what other people say. Professionals, many professionals, they say that dyslexia is a lifelong condition. It's almost like a disease. And what I want to help you understand is that this is what they see. So these professionals have seen children or adults with these symptoms. Nothing really different was done, unless it's the dyslexia program that is out there right now. The 2-year dyslexia program is pretty prevalent for this. And they always have those symptoms. So as a neurodevelopmentalist, what we see is children with these different symptoms, and then we help their parents know something to do differently about it, and then things change. So when you stimulate the brain, things change. And so we believe that this is really a myth, that dyslexia is not a lifetime thing, and hopefully nobody's going to jump off because of that, but hear me out and see why I say that. Now, to prepare us for this, I'm going to be asking you to think differently about dyslexia, obviously. And I want to do this little experiment, okay? So I've got, you may be wondering why this roller coaster is on here. I was going to explain, when you're dealing with dyslexia, it is kind of like a roller coaster. You're up and you're down, and sometimes it's doing good, and sometimes they can't remember, and it does feel a bit like a roller coaster. So back to the experiment. What we're going to do is I'm going to show you a little blurb of words, and what I want you to do is count the letter F's. So you're looking for letter F, And as soon as you know how many there are in this text, I want you to put it in the chat. So here we go. Okay. Leah said 3. Senna said 3. Leah said 3. Anybody see anything more than that? Okay, I'm going to share again. So let's take a look again. If you did not see 6, the ofs just disappeared for you. So this is an example of two people looking at the exact same thing, and you would almost stake your marriage on the fact that there's 3 F's in this, but there's really 6. So that's just a warm up to help you think differently. Did you find all of them with the ofs? All right. For some reason, I can't see you when I have the PowerPoint on, so I apologize for that. But we'll talk about that later. So the foundation that we're looking for to change things is the brain. If you have a disorganized brain, you're going to have disorganized behavior and disorganized functional ability. And to me, that's what dyslexia is. It's very poor functional ability. Now, I'm going to talk about how the brain is organized, and it starts here with tummy time. Now, you may be thinking, this child's 10, this child's 14, whatever. Just hear me out and know that the brain has the kind of plasticity that can change along the way with stimulation. Now, this is a picture of my grandchildren. One day, when you're a grandmother, you'll understand about the grandmother pictures. But I thought this was a great example of entertaining Kaylee, who's the baby. When she was getting fussy with tummy time, her siblings got down and helped her out. When the child is in this prone position and they're moving around just randomly, they're getting all kinds of tactile experience to their brain. This is my foot, this is my leg, this is my arm, this is cool, this is warm. And I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a lot of people that have dysfunctional tactile systems. It's because that wasn't really integrated. So we have so many gadgets for our infants, keeping them off the ground and experiencing those kind of things, that is really causing a negative thing in our society. Because when you keep a baby upright before they're ready, it's a huge factor in neurological disorganization. So here's something that you can actually try with the individual that you're working with. Crawling on the tummy, we call it the army crawl, is very significant to the foundation of learning. And that may sound very strange, but when you have a brain that has a good foundation, it's like everything is put on top of that and it functions much better. Now, why is this important? Well, you have 2 hemispheres of your brain and they have very different jobs. And then there's a corpus callosum in the middle that's the bridge between the 2 hemispheres. So when your right side of your body is controlled by the left hemisphere of your brain and vice versa. So if you do what's called cross pattern movement in an army crawl, like they teach you to do in the army, then you're going to be activating both hemispheres of the brain at the same time, because your right arm is doing the work, your left leg is doing the work. So those 2 happening at the same time, because they're controlled by different hemispheres, is actually building those pathways for communication between the two hemispheres. So what I want you to do is test your family members. No matter what age they are, you want to get them down on the floor and say, I want you to crawl, and you can tell them army crawl if you want, uh, crawl from here to there, and you're going to watch their movements. Are they just pulling with their arms? Are they, have their legs straight and they're pushing with their toes, or anything other than the right arm and the left leg moving at the same time and pulling in a very smooth condition? Means that that part of the brain is disorganized. Now, why does this apply to dyslexia? Well, you do need both sides of your brain working together, obviously, but it also has to do with eye teaming development. We had a dad that was he was really in special ed because they didn't know what to do with him because he couldn't read, and dyslexia wasn't really known then or widely known. And when he went to officer school to be a police officer, he did a lot of cross pattern movement. And he said, it was amazing how much better I could read after that. But my point here is you've got the horizontal tracking of the eyes and the teaming of the eyes that happens at this stage. And so if this is not happening, they may have trouble with their eyes. And obviously, when you're reading, you have to use your visual system. So you've got side-to-side tracking, which can affect your ability to go to the end of the line and come back to the next line where you're supposed to be. So that's one thing that you can check, is that army crawl. Then the creep is at the midbrain level. So we've got the tactile system developing at the medulla level, then crawling on your belly, then crawling on your hands and knees. What you're looking for here is the right hand and the left knee hitting at the exact same time. Very synchronized movement, and a child should be able to chew gum and talk and creep on their hands and knees, backwards and forwards, in a very smooth pattern, to know that that's not thought through with your cortical part of your brain. It is just automatic. That's the foundation. Now here, you're doing a lot of eye tracking and convergence. That's what's starting to develop here when you're on your hands and knees. And of course, this is very important for reading. I wanted to show you this quick little video, and what I want you to do is watch for synchronization, the left hand and the right knee hitting at the same time. She's going to a target, and then I want you to watch this next part as she's moving along. She's almost going to sit down here for a minute. Thought about it. No, I'm going to keep going. And then watch what happens just before she gets to her object of attention. She sees some little fleck of something on the carpet, and that's bringing her attention. So that is when your central vision is developing at this stage as well. So if your central vision isn't working well, then you could skip small words. You could just see the first of a word and say something that starts like that. There's all kinds of negative things if your central vision isn't developed. Now, walking, we're always wanting our little infants to walk, right? We can't wait for the day that they walk. And so we often encourage them, and oftentimes to a negative. Now, this doesn't always happen from outside sources. Like for me, what happened was we lived in a very small apartment, and I could just creep over to something, stand up, and just cruise around. So I was walking at 9 months, and I had a lot of trouble reading. But the good news is that it's never too late. I actually did a program, a neurodevelopmental program in my 40s, and it made all the difference. So it's never too late. That's the exciting thing. Now, I wanted to tell you about Daniel. Daniel was a child of a missionary, and they were in Mexico and had missionary help. They had help in their house, helping to take care of the child while they were doing some of their duties. So, this housekeeper was not about to let this little towhead down on that dirty floor. So she carried him all the time. He didn't creep or crawl. So he missed those developmental things. When this happens, it causes kind of a break in your foundation. And at 14 years old, Daniel's mom brought him to see me. She said, it's the darndest thing. He'll know something, he'll know a word one day, and the next day we look at that word and it's like it's disappeared. She said, we look under the table, we try to make a joke of it because she didn't want him to feel bad. But, when they know that they knew something one day and not the next, they start to kind of get a negative feeling about themselves, which is really sad. So she didn't want to label him. She was homeschooling, but he was 14 and he couldn't read. I mean, just like hardly any words at all. So the good news is, like I said, it's never too late. Daniel at 14 could not read. He was homeschooled. When he got to the end of his schooling at homeschool, he was 18. And he was on track for all of his subjects. And when he went to college, he got a 4.0. He always was telling his mom, well, I'm going to be a millionaire one day, Mom. I'm going to take care of you. And she was just like, yeah, hopefully if you can read, we can get you to read. I think we can. Well, he has a family of his own. He did become a millionaire. And just all to say, he very quickly came up to where he needed to be when he got his brain organized. So the highest level, you've got the pons, midbrain, and the cortex. The cortex is the thinking part of the brain. When you get to this level, you're using that each hemisphere the way it needs to be and running things back and forth very, very well. And when your brain is organized, you do your homework quicker, you have a clean room. If you have a child that you say, go in and clean your room, and they just don't even know where to start, it looks worse 30 minutes later than it is when you send them in there. That may be because they have a disorganized brain. You can answer questions easier. You've got better time management. And we had one 16-year-old that kind of did an experiment on his own. He put himself on a program of crawling, creeping, and skipping every day, 2 minutes, once or twice a day for about 6 weeks. His sibling was on the program, and he said, I wonder if this would really do anything for me. And he said about 6 weeks later, his teachers were commenting about his papers were much more organized. His thoughts were coming out better on the program. Now, some of you are going, I don't know about all this because this child is 14 or 10 or whatever, and you want them to get down and crawl on their belly. Well, sometimes I just tell the kiddos about the story of Naaman. Naaman in the Bible was asked to do something that he felt was very much below him, and but it wasn't hard. It was an easy thing to do. But if he hadn't done that, he wouldn't have gotten his healing. So that's often what I talk to the older kids about. Now, I don't know. I'm sure you've heard the word Orton if you have anything to do with dyslexia. Samuel Orton is the one that found dyslexia and named it. He called it word blindness at first. Now, he noticed that these people had similar things going on with them besides just their trouble reading. They had balance issues, they had coordination issues, and when you don't go through those lower level brain organization activities long enough, then you do have coordination issues. They had eye issues. They had visual sequential processing issues, holding pieces together visually in a chunk. And they had dominance issues. We're going to talk about that. And they had trouble with phonetic awareness. But he also said they had problems with reversing, transposing letters, clumsiness, figure drawing errors, and heightened emotionality. So he's noticing all these things, but if you'll notice the uh, what is currently the most popular treatment for dyslexia is a phonetic program. So they say it's mostly phonetic awareness. What I'm trying to do is broaden your view of this and say there's other root causes that could uh, be causing those symptoms. For instance, visual obviously is very important when you're reading, seeing things correctly. And so, a lot of times when children have trouble reading, the first thing you do is take them to the eye doctor and see about their acuity. Can they see up close? Can they see far away? That's acuity. Convergence is where the eyes are working together, putting the image from one eye directly on top of the other. And in our view, that is a developmental activity that can be changed as you exercise, that it's more of a brain controlling than a muscle issue. So eye convergence is huge. This is me when I was 8, having so much trouble reading. I remember my father reading with me, and I remember him saying, "That word you just read is the same word that you're reading here. It hasn't changed." And I'm firstborn wanting to please. If I'd known the word, I would have been telling him the word, but I didn't remember it. So sometimes you have those kinds of issues with children that are labeled dyslexic. They know a word one time on the page and then they don't know it the next. But something that I had not experienced at all until I was in the neurodevelopmental field is the central vision. That's what you see right in the center. And if that is not developed well, things don't look right. And my personal example of this, because I had this when I was younger, is I took piano lessons, and I would practice at home, and then I'd go to my lesson. And when I was at home, I could play with one hand and take the other hand, guide it across, and be able to tell whether the note went up or down from where I was. But when I was at the piano teacher, you have to keep your hands on the keys. And she would say to me, "Don't you see that just went up one?" Well, I really couldn't, but I couldn't explain it to her. And piano lessons stopped very quickly after that. But if there's any of these problems, acuity or central vision or convergence problems, this is what the child could be seeing. So just keep this in mind when you're working with children. Sometimes, like especially that last line, is what it might look like if they had central vision issues and things just dropped off. So you can imagine trying to phonetically read something like that when the letters weren't all there. So when you have a visual issue, you have trouble receiving the correct information to be able to get it out. And again, these things are things that can be fixed. That's the good news. Several years ago, I thought, okay, I'm going to take a group of dyslexic labeled kids, because I don't label anyone, but they do come in with labels when I see them oftentimes, and see what's in common about this. So I just took several areas, like, were they mixed eye? So they're writing with one hand and their visual is the other side, like right-handed, left-eyed. Mixed-eyed, mixed-eared, if they're right-handed and left-eared, or vice versa, left-handed and right-eared. Do they have visual processing challenges? That means not able to hold visual information together. And auditory processing, which is holding auditory information together. And almost 100% of them had most all of these, or a combination of them. So what I'd like to do is equip you with something that you can check for visual sequential processing. That is your visual short-term memory. So if you go to brainsprints.com and just scroll all the way to the bottom, it'll say free test kit. When you click on that, you'll get both the auditory and the visual test kits, and you can check the individual you're working with and see where they are. It will also give you some advice on activities that you can do to strengthen that processing ability. It just takes 2 minutes twice a day to really make a difference in the visual processing. So you can imagine, if you can hold pieces of visual information together better, you'll be able to read better. Now, visual sequential processing is one thing, holding the pieces together. Visual discrimination is another aspect of ability, and that's the ability to see similar things and discriminate between them. Now, the way that I have several levels, like 10 different levels of visual discrimination. Each one has 3 different sets with them. But the object is, you put the small cards out on the table, then you show one large card, and there are actually 12 in a set. So if they're really struggling, you can start with just 6. But they look at this big card and they find the one that's the same. Other levels have things like this, where there's unusual fonts, so they really have to fine-tune their visual discrimination. Now, I want you to try this one. You're going to look at this, and then I'm going to show you some of these, and you're going to find it in the group. Okay, and let's see. Okay, now see if you can find it. When we're in a different kind of seminar setting, we can you can just shout it out. But here in the middle at the bottom is the one that you were looking for. So different levels of visual discrimination there is not only discriminating, but holding those by showing it to them, taking it away, and then they see the whole group, and then they have to find it. So that's the way visual discrimination works. Now, we're going to talk about dominance, which has to do with your long-term memory. It's where your information is stored. So we bring information in through our 5 senses. We hear, see, say, feel, and you touch, see, hear, sight, and taste. All right, so information is coming into our brain through our senses, and then each one, the ear, eye, hand, and foot, put the information somewhere where you can hopefully find it later on. This has everything to do with dominance, and I'm going to describe that here because you've probably had the frustrating experience of working with your child. You taught them something, you're so excited, you pull it out the next day, you show it to them again, and they just look at it like a cow at a new gate. It's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Are you going to teach me this? And you just want to pull your hair out because you thought you had it yesterday, but they just can't find it. So when you're thinking about dominance, you want to start with the hand. The hand is genetically predisposed to be right or left-handed. Now, some people are genetically mixed-handed or ambidextrous, but what I've found is most of the time when they're still being ambidextrous, they are left-handed people that are in a right-handed influenced world. So that's kind of what happened with Timothy. He was diagnosed with dyslexia. He'd been through a year of the dyslexia program, and we actually went to church with this family, and she found out what I did, and she asked if we could help. So Timothy was using his right hand, but he was really, we found out, left-handed. And so as it turned out, we pulled him out of school for the last semester and through the summer so that we could really work on this hand dominance. So switching the hand is something that can happen, and especially when they're using the wrong hand. So when Timothy went back to school, because he was labeled dyslexic, they put him in the dyslexia program. And his mom, after 6 weeks or so, went to the dyslexia teacher and said, I want to find out how Timothy's doing here. And she said, oh, he's doing great. She said, no, I really want to know the details of what's happening. And the teacher said, really, I don't know why he's in this class, because he's just leading everybody with everything. He's moving so fast, he doesn't even need to be in this class. So he went up, I don't know, a year or more in reading in just a very short amount of time, and was because we took care of the root cause of things, which with him was a big one was using the wrong hand. Then he was able to overcome all those other symptoms. Now, here's a look at what I was kind of talking about earlier, where your right side is controlled by your left hemisphere and vice versa. So the most efficient way to store information is, if you're right-handed, you want to be right-eyed, right-eared, right-footed, and of course right-handed for that to be efficient. So that means everything going to the same hemisphere of the brain for storage. If there's efficient storage, then it's really a happy situation because you've got this efficient filing system, everything's in there, and it just comes right back out. But if the storage is not efficient, it looks kind of like this. You know it's in there, but how time-consuming, energy-expending, and frustrating would it be to be able to find that information? All right, so let's talk about making reading easier for the children with dyslexia. This is where we start oftentimes, is checking on the visual, obviously, and then teaching them with a different approach. So the main intervention for dyslexia these days is a very intense phonics program. It has some tactile components and other things like that, lots of phonetic awareness. But if someone cannot hold pieces of information together auditorily, then that approach is not going to work for them. It's going to be very slow, very laborious, and very challenging. So next month, I'm going to do something on ADD or ADHD called The Absent-Minded Professor. And that's going to help you put that piece of the puzzle together here, where the holding the auditory information together obviously is something you have to do for phonics. You have to hold this piece, this piece, this piece, and the rule together to get that information out. And that can be very laborious, especially if your processing is low. So we talked about that free test kit. Go to brainsprints.com and download the test kit. You've got both auditory and visual there. But in the meantime, I want to have you do a little experiment for me. We know that the pendulum has swung in reading all the way to phonics is the only way to teach reading, right? So let me make this point by having you read this. Now, you don't have to read the whole thing to get the point of what we're talking about here. Our brain, now let me first ask you, and I know you can't answer, but just hypothetically, are you reading this phonetically? Are you reading this visually? How are you able to read this? We thought spelling was important, right? Well, the reason that you can read this is because once you know a word, even if the letters are scrambled a bit like this, your brain can translate that and knows the word. You're not reading it phonetically at all. Now, I know that really blows some people's theory, but what I'm trying to help you with is to know that we are really sight readers. Once we know the word, we don't sound it out again. Phonics is important. Don't go away from here and say, Dr. Jan said phonics isn't important. It's very important, and it's very effective when processing is high enough to handle it. In the meantime, I want you to try this. It's called echo reading. Now, we've got some readers I'm going to show you here in a minute that I usually start with, but the premise is that you read a paragraph or a page to them, and then they read it back to you. The very same thing. Don't alternate different paragraphs, because the whole crux of the matter is they need input to be able to output. We're always asking for output, and reading is definitely output. So to mitigate that and to help with the comprehension, the fluency of reading, the intonation of your voice, expression, and just word recognition, you read it to them first, and then they read it to you. Now, the way you can tell that you're reading the right amount is they don't need help or make more than 2 or 3 errors in the amount that you've read to them. So you read, they read the same thing. You read, they read the same thing. These books are a lot of times what I use for echo reading, and this series, this pathway series. And one of the reasons is oftentimes dyslexics are older and they don't like that baby stuff that a lot of the phonics is. And these are like chapter books. They look like chapter books. They're hardbound books, and they really are great. Now, if you have a little bit older student, like the 14-year-old that someone's working with, I recommend high noon books. Those are low reading levels, but high interest books. So you could look into that as well. So at first, what we're doing is building a good sight word vocabulary. We're also building the fact that they can read. Oftentimes there's a challenge with the children that have been labeled dyslexic, and they have this in their head, I can't read. Well, anytime you tell yourself you can't, then you can't. So this will help them to know how to read. We also, for these first two books, actually, there's one more that's before this. We have the cards that you can get to go with those to teach them sight words. That's okay. And we also have another resource called the 1,000 Most Commonly Read Words. So again, with a technique that's put in the directions, you can give input, 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 and teach them these sight words while you're working on their processing so that you can bring the phonics back in. This is what I was talking about. This is another set of books that I usually use for younger children. We do have the cards that go with them as well. You'll see that they could also be done phonetically, but if they're not ready for it, after they get to 3-letter words, then they really struggle. So another resource for you. Now, if the child has mixed dominance, one of the major things is that inconsistent recall. One day they know it, the next day they don't. When you've got this storage of information in the wrong place, and you're mixed dominant, you often lack common sense. You lack logic. You get emotional very easily. Just the slightest little thing makes your emotions flare up. And you're often poor at testing. What happens is, it's a test, you get under stress, you go into your emotional hemisphere of your brain, and you have no access to what information you have. Excuse me. So the neurodevelopmental approach I found is very effective, and I want to give you an example of John. John went to kindergarten, and he came home, mid-year, and said to his mom, "I'm not a very smart little boy." And his mom was horrified because she knew he was brilliant. And so the school wouldn't give her any help because he wasn't failing, because he was so smart he could compensate. But he was getting a very low self-esteem. So she pulled him out of school. She put him in a private school. They did a dyslexia test and labeled him dyslexic and put him through the traditional dyslexia intervention. And so when I saw him, his reading recognition test was 5th grade, 3rd month. And for a 10-year-old, that's right on track. The reading comprehension was a little bit higher than that at 6th grade because he could figure out, even though he didn't read all the words, he could figure out what it was meaning. Oh, and by the way, she did have his IQ tested, and it was like 130. He was really brilliant. So this would be counted as a success, but his mom said he's still having to work way too hard to do all his stuff, even though he's testing at grade level. Is there anything we can do? So she put him on a neurodevelopmental program. And so when he finished, he was 11th grade, 11 years, 8 months. So he'd been on program about 16 months. He was 6th grade age, and he went from 5th grade, 3rd month, to 9th grade in reading recognition. And his comprehension was 10th grade. So what I see here is it really released his full potential. Instead of just hitting that one piece of phonetic awareness that Orton was talking about, it took care of all the others. So I took some of the kids that were labeled dyslexic, and we just did a comparison of when they started and 4 months later, the progress that they made. And the top here, the top green bar is 11 to 15-year-olds, and increased their reading comprehension by 1 year and 2 months in 4 months' time. Their recognition went up almost a year, 0.8, and their math went up a year. Now, the younger kids, it went up not as fast because they're much younger. So what I want to do now is help you understand how to test for dominance. We're going to look at eye dominance first, and there's a near point and a far point dominance. So near point would be, what would they put in microscope? Which eye would they put to a microscope, to a camera, to a kaleidoscope, anything like that. You can roll up a little bitty tube or take a pen and take the insides out and have them look through that and see which eye they go to. This is one way to test for far point dominance, and that is take a tube and have them fully extend their arms and look at you through the tube. You can look right down that tube and see if they're using the right eye or the left eye. Now, if the child is right-handed and right-eared and right-footed, but they're left eye dominant, oftentimes the challenge is visual long-term memory. You can say, I know this child's smart, I can tell them something, or they can hear something and they always remember it. But if they read it or see it, they don't. Now, some people have really extreme abilities visually, and they can remember movies and scenes and things like that. But for information coming in, oftentimes they have trouble with their visual long-term memory. Now, the auditory dominance, that often emerges when you're working with that lower level. When you're on the floor on your stomach, the information coming in is much different than it is when you're up on your hands and knees or walking. And so you're developing your ear dominance along the way. And whichever ear is dominant is where the information is being stored. Even though you hear with both ears, the brain decides that there's one to put in long-term storage. This definitely can be influenced by ear infections. So I found that I had lots of ear infections when I was little, but when I was tested at 40-something, I was using my left ear. I don't know for sure if it was from ear infections or, when you're talking on the phone and you're tied to a cord, I'm showing my age here, and you put it on your left ear so you can use your right hand. So we can influence by using the wrong one, or like ear infections can occlude to tell the brain, oh, this isn't working too good, I got to use the other one. If a child has mixed dominant auditory, they're right-handed, right-eyed, right foot, but left-eared, then the problem could be auditory long-term memory. Now, there's a whole industry growing around the learning styles. So someone said that they wanted equality in the school for their child that was a tactile learner, and they wanted everything taught tactily. Well, if you have both auditory and visual mixed dominance, your eye and ear are off, then oftentimes you're a tactile learner, which is the most inefficient way to learn. You can't really take in information effectively with everything tactile. So our whole view is get everything working correctly. Make sure the eyes are working, they're tracking, they're converging, they're storing things in the right place, and then these kinds of things will be averted. The foot has not much to do with the academics or your knowledge base, but it does show, some organization of the system. So it's whatever one they're kicking with. They just stand, if you say stand on one foot, they'll stand on one foot, kick or hop. Now, I did forget to tell you about how to do the auditory dominance check. So one way you can do it is be on one side of the door, have somebody on the other side, and have the child you're testing with you and say, walk over to that door and see if you can hear what they're saying on the other side of the door. So be sure to be away, several steps away from the door, and it not being influenced by where the door is, which way they would put their ear. But that's one way to test for auditory dominance. Now, if you've got a child that you go, wow, this makes a lot of sense to me, I'd like to find out where some of these key factors are, what the status is with the child I'm working with. We have something called the neurodevelopmental screening. We can do this by virtual on video, or we can also do it in person if you're in Texas. Have a couple of places, the McKinney area, and then closer to Houston and Palestine. But it's a really inexpensive way to find out. And we will send out a coupon code for this for $20 off. They're usually $65 for a screening. And it just shows some key factors and helps guide you to know what direction do I go in to help. We also have free resources. There's free articles on our website. Those test kits, be sure to get those. We have a YouTube channel called Brain Coach Tips, podcasts, and we also have a variety of in-home programs. The programs work on all the different areas kind of that we've touched on, the sensory integration, the dominance, the auditory and visual short-term memory, the academics, as well as the brain organization. So I just want to end with what you've all probably been taught and told, that on the internet, the treatment for dyslexia. There's no known way to correct the underlying brain malfunctions that causes dyslexia. I hope that you've seen from this is that we have to dig into the foundation, find out where the glitches are, and just so that you know that you can make a difference here. We are magnificently made. Our Creator has created us with brain plasticity that can change. When you stimulate the brain, it really can change. So let me stop sharing here. And if there's, I'm going to see about changing the mode here.
Okay, I have a question regarding my son. He is 15 years old, Down syndrome, and he is diagnosed by dyslexia here in Egypt. He started to read in Arabic and English, but we are facing some problems regarding the reading fluency and reading comprehension. We tried the neurodevelopment approach years ago, and we get some gains, but we are still stuck in auditory memory. His recalling number, he can recall only 3 numbers. Even by trying chunking method, we reached four letters, 4 numbers, sorry, and he can recall a sentence about 7 to 8 words. He is verbal, by the way, and he's fluently verbal. He can speak fluently Arabic, and he understands English but cannot speak it. And we are still struggling in auditory processing and working memory, and auditory memory specifically. His visual memory is a little bit better, but it's
Okay, so let me just address some of what she said already. When this is a good example of auditory processing being so low that phonics is not working well, and I would highly recommend and oftentimes uh, the auditory is hard to get up for children with Down syndrome. So continuing to work on that is very important. So I wouldn't give up on that. Twice a day, or um, even 3 or 4 times a day for a very short amount of time, maybe 1 minute each time, playing auditory games. And there's a number of those on our website, different auditory activities that you can utilize. But I would do the sight reading with him, and the echo reading should be very helpful for him. So I would definitely go that direction. That's going to help with that intonation, fluency, and even word recognition as well. Um, I'm not sure about if he's if he's understanding English fine, then it's fine to teach him to read in English. But if he's not, I mean, it's amazing, for him to have 2 languages. That's terrific. Okay, other questions? So it was so clear about all of that you don't have any questions. Oh, it's hard when it's such a large topic, and you in an hour's time, you just have a piece of it that you can give to people. But what I was trying to do here is take the main things that were uh, challenging for the kids with dyslexia. But if you come to our other monthly seminars, you'll start to get all the pieces together. And I just want to highly, you know, commend you for being here. And I'd like to think that you would take this to heart and try it out, because it is very effective. But Leah, did you have
I
something?
wanted to ask you, oh, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to ask if you only see the child maybe 3 days a week. Is this something that can work to do it?
Yes, if only 3 days a week. Well, of course, 5 days would be better, but 3 days would definitely help. Are you talking about working on the auditory processing?
Just, yeah, everything.
Mhm. Yeah, it would.
Mhm.
Every little bit helps. So, and I would do it as part of your. I'm assuming you're a tutor.
Yes.
Yeah, I would do it as part of maybe even the warm up to the other things that you do, and know that when you test for the auditory processing, you're going to get a lot of clues about why the child's struggling. And then if you do some things like, just watch his eyes, check with the tracking, check with the convergence, and see what's happening to make sure that's not a root cause challenge for him, then all those things that you've been trained to do will work better.
Okay.
I'm curious, with the dominance, you had said that it emerges after the lower levels of the brain. So if you do some of those testing and notice that they have a mixed dominance, do you try to switch the dominance, or do you have them work on the creeping, the crawling, and try to see if their brain will organize that dominance on its own? Or how would you even determine which dominance to switch it to?
Yeah, that's a good question. We are always going to follow the lead of the hand. So if they're not mixed handed, then you can be assured that you want the right eye if they're right handed, you want the right ear if they're right handed. and vice versa for left-handed. So if they're mixed-handed still after the age of like 8, then sometimes you need a little more professional help with that to help determine which one they really are genetically supposed to be. So the question is, do we switch the dominance? Yes. And do we, so part of the whole philosophy is work with the whole system instead of one piece. You know, oftentimes a professional has just a main focus. You know, vision therapy, they're going to work on visual. They're not going to look at anything having to do with coordination or lower level brain organization. So as they're older, the lower level brain organization is going to do more for just that foundation than it is for the dominance. So you would directly address the eye and ear. The ear, you would just plug the ear that you don't want to be dominant, you know, like if they're left ear,
Sure.
but right-handed, just to wear an earplug, maybe all waking hours. And sometimes it takes 9 months or so to switch. And with the eye, we usually say about 4 hours. And during academics is best because you're forcing the information to go to the right place. So
Sure.
a patch or some people do like sunglasses that they just block off this, or some frames that fit nicely, and that just is part of the frequency, intensity, and duration that we use of telling the brain, oh, this isn't working good. I got to use this. I got to use this. I got to use this. Now, the caveat to that, the only thing that could be negative about that is if there's a weak eye. So you don't want to do this on someone that's got a weak eye or the convergence isn't working. And so what I want to do, right, since this has come up, I want to teach you how to do that. So you're going to have something about 18 inches from the bridge of their nose. You're going to come in to about 2.5 inches and come back out. So just smoothly in, smoothly out, and you're going to watch, are both those eyes coming and working together, or all of a sudden when you're coming in, does one just, you know, float off to the side? So the only negative thing that can happen from occluding is if you occlude the weak eye, a weak eye. So you want to check that before you do that. But typically the brain does not choose the weak eye for the dominant eye. So you're usually safe with that, but I just like to, you know, put that caution out there.
Yes. Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Well, thank you all for spending your time with me. I hope that it was eye-opening, that I saw several comments in the chat about the paragraph with the Fs. Isn't that interesting? So we just want to have our mind open to new things. New things are happening all the time, but I'm excited that the new technology that's out there is now proving how effective the neurodevelopmental approach was. When I started, we didn't have any of that. Now they can actually see those things happening. But whether you can see it or not, it's very effective. So thanks for being with me. And if you have other questions, we do have consults, free consults that you can, if you have questions, you can call the office.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.